Domestic violence in American and other cultures. Introduction. Domestic violence has turned out to be a global problem, with hundreds of thousands of people being victims of the vice. Violence accounts for the majority of deaths and disabilities worldwide, and this is an indication that domestic violence is a serious issue. Today, domestic violence is one of the most serious problems that the United States faces. 66% of the American population asserts that domestic violence is a grave problem. The major areas of domestic violence include physical, sexual, financial, and emotional abuse. This paper identifies and explains the 4 areas in the American context as well as in 4 other cultures. Physical abuse. The perpetrator of this form of violence uses force against the victim, injuring him or her. Acts such as strangling, shooting, punching, kicking, and slapping, among others, are all under physical abuse in American laws. Even without causing serious injuries, a person who commits these acts is considered to have physically abused the other individual. The majority of domestic violence victims in America go through physical abuse. In the Indian culture, abuse comprises of all actions that lead to physical harm or injuries to the victim by unlawfully forcing him or her to give out dowry, property, and valuable securities, among other illegal demands. 38% of all Indian men are reported to have admitted that they had physically abused their intimate partners, while 6% of all women had assaulted their spouses. On the other hand, over 10 million Americans experience physical violence every year. Approximately 60% of Native American females are assaulted by their partners in their lifetime. Sexual abuse. In America, sexual abuse is a prominent type of domestic violence that constitutes sexual assault, rape, and harassment such as annoying touch, among other humiliating behaviors. The scope of interpretation of sexual abuse is very wide and covers coercive behaviors that limit one's reproduction rights. For instance, a woman may be said to have been sexually abused if she is forced to use contraception or have an abortion. This type of sexual abuse is referred to as reproductive coercion. Other than physical abuse, the majority of domestic cases involve sexual abuse. 1 in every 5 women and 1 out of 59 men in the United States undergo sexual abuse during their lifespan. 9.4% of American women have been raped by their love partners. In the South African culture, sexual abuse involves making suggestive remarks, forceful physical contact with a person for sexual advances, showing pornography, demands or appeals for sexual favors, and any other provoking sexual conduct, whether physical, verbal, or nonverbal. Incest, child pornography, compelled rape, coerced private parts exposure, and compelled self-sexual practices are treated as sexual abuse under South African laws. In South Africa, 28% of all men have committed rape, with almost 55,000 kids and youth being victims of the vice. Family members perpetrate 3 out of 10 such children's sexual abuse cases. Emotional abuse. In the U.S., emotional abuse involves damaging the self-esteem of another person. The perpetrator of the vice persistently insults, humiliates, or criticizes the victim to destroy his or her self-worth. This form of abuse is seemingly very rampant in unhealthy relationships and thus not easily understood. It is worth noting that in the majority of states in the U.S., the evidence of emotional abuse must be combined with proof of another form of abuse or indicate extreme coercion for it to be sufficient for the attraction of a domestic violence action. In Canadian culture, emotional abuse is legally defined as verbal or nonverbal mistreatment that possibly has a severely negative psychological impact on the victim. A study involving 1,000 American women aged at least 15 years showed that 36% of them had gone through emotional abuse perpetrated by their spouses or lovers. In 2009, approximately 17% of Canadians reported that they had gone through some form of emotional abuse in their love relationships at that time or previously by being put down or called names. Financial abuse. In America, this form of violence is legally defined as an unlawful, unauthorized, or inappropriate use of assets, resources, possessions, or benefits that belong to somebody else. It is worth noting that financial abuse does not involve the monetary aspect only. For instance, a partner or family member may be termed as financially abusive if he or she prevents his or her close relative or spouse from getting employed or educated. Financial abuse is very rampant, especially among families with finances pooled in joint accounts. In the UK culture, laws define financial abuse as the violation of a person's rights concerning his or her financial dealings or property. An abusive partner or family member may deprive their spouse, or the rest of the family members, of access to the money available, hence depriving them of such things as food and clothing, to mention a few. 8% of Americans and 1/5 of UK adults are reported to have been victims of financial abuse. Conclusion. Although domestic violence has been mostly perceived as limited to physical assault, laws in various countries have addressed a larger scope of the problem. Cases with sufficient evidence regarding physical, financial, emotional, or sexual meet the domestic violence threshold. Therefore, victims of these unlawful acts in America and other cultures should courageously seek justice from the relevant authorities.